Speaking of books, mine is out. It's called "The God That I Was Given: Looking for Faith After Losing My Religion," and sort of details my journey out of the cult of the United Pentecostal Church. And I sort of come at it from the angle of memoir, of kind of recounting my experiences. But like any good memoir, I think people will be able to see a lot of their experiences reflected through my own. In fact, I talked with someone just yesterday, and he was telling me, even though his experience was different, the details were different, so much of what I shared resonated with his own experience of growing up in a rural setting that was dominated by religious cult practices. And then I sort of take the reader through the journey of my evolution over a decade or more, and sort of where I land at today, still identifying as a Christian, but certainly rejecting all of the cultic practices of the United Pentecostal Church. That's in a nutshell what it's all about.
Yeah. So, as a white man who has
Hmm.
deconstructed sort of from a position of privilege, right? Because you were a pastor in the church, in addition to being a cult baby. Like, what does that feel like? I guess, like, in the context of everything we're seeing right now with the country.
Yeah, and so you bring up the privilege and the status, and certainly I recognize that everything that I say, even on this side of it, I am speaking from a place of privilege. And so, when we have these conversations about what's happening in the nation right now, I understand that there are people to the left of me on the political spectrum that look at the state of the country and they say, to hell with it, let's burn it down and start over and build something better. And when I hear people talk like that, I'm like, that does make me a little nervous, just if I'm being honest. But I understand that from their perspective, they are experiencing already a lot of the things that I fear. And the only reason that I'm insulated from it is because this country was built for me by people who look like me. So it
Yeah.
was it was built by people who look like me for people that look like me. And so that's why I get a little nervous when people start talking about revolution or starting over. And the same way, right? So I think that perhaps if I was in a different place, or if my status was different in the United States, I think the resolution of my book would certainly be different. I do catch a little bit of criticism, and rightly so, because I don't separate completely from Christianity, or I don't separate completely from everything that I believed in my youth. And I understand that perspective. But I think the reason that I have that is because, again, of the privilege and the status that I enjoy as a white male in this nation. I don't know how to completely separate myself from that, other than to acknowledge it and to continue to move forward with intellectual humility, understanding that I don't have it all figured out. I don't know what I don't know. And that people like yourself, a woman in America, and certainly Black women and Black men in America, or people of color, have a better perspective than I do on the inequalities that exist in this nation, and that are often leveraged not only by white normative culture in the government, but also in these religious settings that all of us move in and out of, and certainly manifest themselves in cult groups that we talk a lot about on this program.
Well, I want to say I think you're a fantastic example. And I think that the work of deconstructing out loud and letting people watch your journey, isn't for everyone. Like you said, like you're going to get criticism, right? I get criticism, right? No matter how careful we are. And you're so good at talking about this, about like how you understand. It's because you've had that privilege and that ties into that. I think there's a lot of value in your book because you are not doing the binary knee jerk I'm going as far away from religion as possible. Right. And like, nothing against that. I did that. But we have that perspective, and it's maybe even more comfortable for people to just reject everything, but that doesn't have to be everyone's journey. And I think part of what we often struggle with after high control, especially childhoods and adulthoods, is understanding that you can choose. Like you can choose to be, find the relationship with God that you want, right? Be in Christianity or in any belief system or in anything. I'm going through it right now with working out. I
Uh-huh.
was in the cult of the army and the working out and the running, and like it just struck me the other day. I was like, I don't even know if I like running. Like I don't even know if I like working out. But I know that that relationship with working out was unhealthy. The one where I thought I had to
Yeah.
punish my body and do this stuff and blah blah blah. And I
I
want to
think you
find a healthy one.
I think you did like leaving all of those men in the dust when you
I
ran
mean,
past them.
that was pretty epic for sure. But I just wanted to say, like, I think part of the value of your book to our listeners, whether, right, like I have never been religious. Part of the value of your book to me is the not choosing the binary, like choosing your life the way you want to choose it, right? I can apply that to my relationship with exercise. It doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
just about Jesus. And I think you've just done a really good job with that.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I do encourage folks to read it and to stay with it, because not only do I get that criticism from the left, but also from the right, right? People, even in my own family, who have chosen for various reasons to stay in that particular church. A lot of times, they read parts of the book, and I tell them, you're going to read parts of it and you're going to get angry with me, but stay with it. There's an arc, right? There's an evolution, and at the end you still might be angry with me, but I think you'll have a better understanding of where I'm at today. And a lot of the reasons that I'm working through what my faith looks like on this side of my deconstruction is not only philosophical, but it's also practical. I told my therapist the other day, I'm starting with a new therapist, and so I sort of have to, tell your story up front when you first check in. And I told her, I said, she asked about where I'm at in my faith, and I tried to explain it to her, and I said, a lot of it for me is practical as well, because I'm 54 years old, and there's, you know, generally speaking, I have less days left in this world than I have a previous. And so if I'm going to make some radical decisions that are going to upset my life, upset and disrupt everyone, I'm doing enough of that now. So if I come out and say, I'm convinced, I reject religion, I'm an atheist, and by the way, I believe that atheists have really, really good arguments, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I'm saying for me, I choose to still believe because it doesn't make a huge difference in how I live my life on a daily basis. It brings me a certain amount of comfort and peace and solace that I find in a belief system that helps me navigate the world. But that's true for everyone, and that's even true for those who reject religion altogether. They can find purpose and meaning and morality without the religious construct. But for me, it's more of a practical decision because I know that my decisions have ramifications and impact not only myself, but those that are around me. And so it becomes a cost benefit analysis, right? For me, how much benefit and how much cost and how much harm would decisions like that maybe inflict? And I might change my mind tomorrow. I might evolve even further. And there's always that possibility.
Well,
But as of today, this is where I'm at.
that's even, I think, implied in your subtitle, right? Is it finding God after losing my religion or searching for God? It's
Looking for
looking,
faith. Yeah, looking for
right?
faith.
Like
Yeah.
it's not finished, right?
Yeah.
You
Right.
didn't choose finding faith after losing my religion, or you didn't choose like looking, right?
I
Like
was
it's
looking for
still
faith after losing religion.
future.
Yeah. So there's still
Yeah.
the possibility, yeah,
And I
of
still feel
something being
like
out
you're
there.
still working some of that out, but I think that
Right.
is true for, writing. Like writing a memoir, something deep, something where you're like taking things that you went through that changed you and putting them into words. Like that's always going to open stuff up. And then I feel like, you'll go back and you'll look at it 3 years from now, which, Uncultured just turned 3. And it's like, yeah, I'm different. I'm more different than I was. I'm more evolved in a lot of these things. I get some of the criticisms that I was very offended by 3 years ago. I get them now. And so it's interesting that it's like sort of this journey too that you're still going to go on as an author after you finish.
And I don't believe I've ever had the opportunity to share this with you. I'll share it with you now. But I, like so many people, I discovered you on TikTok. So I was doing the thing, scrolling through it, and I come across your content. And initially, I was obviously impressed with your credentials and your ability to speak to these particular issues. But there was also some some residual feelings like, who does this person think they are, right? Why is she so adamant and in my face about this? And so it made me upset initially, but that, I think that speaks more to my status, privilege, and power that I've enjoyed as a white male in the United States, right? So going back to attempting to understand what you were saying, but then the more I listened, right, the more I was like, she has a point. This makes sense. This resonates with my own experience in the United Pentecostal Church. And so that initial, right, that cognitive dissonance that everybody experiences when they are confronted with new information that doesn't necessarily align with how they've navigated the world up until that point. I experienced that when I first discovered you on TikTok. And I think we all go through that when we're confronted with new information that we doesn't necessarily resonate with the tools that we've been given to navigate the world up until we're confronted with that new information.
Yeah, and then the thing we never realize is that once I was just talking on my other podcast, Hey White Women, that like, once you click on that white privilege and you go to learn
Yeah.
more, like it's not going to stop until you're trying to take down the entire system.
Right.
But I also want to say that's part of the power of your book as well, right? Is deconstructing the patriarchy to the patriarchy, right? Is from that white male position of power voice saying the things, right? Like one of my questions is, what feedback have you had from your audience?
Yeah, so
And
it's been mixed, mostly positive, but I did have one family member who attempted to leave a 1-star review, a distant cousin, and she was like, half of, I think the wording was, half of everything that he's written is a lie, which I was curious about which half. And it was obvious, right, that she didn't read the book. And she said all of these things, that I was saying negative things about our grandmother, that she raised us to be racist and all of this. And that's certainly not the point that I was making. Certainly there was racism in the way that my grandmother interacted with people. There was racism in the way that my church interacted with my best friend. There was racism in the way that I responded to certain instances. And so I tell that story. And what I'm attempting to do through those stories is hold up a mirror and say, what, we can romanticize all of this if we want, but we're not telling the truth. And initially when it was coming out, I was having a conversation with my mother, who is 90 years old. And she's attempting to, at the same time, hold the two ideas of being proud of her son for writing a book, but then also having to deal with all of the information that's in the book that doesn't necessarily reflect what she believes to be true. And the way that I tried to explain it to her is, Mom, if you read a book and it was just all rainbows and unicorns, that book wouldn't be very interesting to anyone. So you have to tell the good and the bad, and you have to tell
Mhm.
all of the experiences for it to be real. And if you think about it, that's the human experience. That's what makes our relationships worth investing in. Not that they're perfect, and not that we never offend anyone, or not that we ever share with someone that we love something that hurts them and is also trying to help them. But it's the fact that we continue to love one another through all of that. That's reality. That's what a real relationship is. And so if I'm writing something, it needs to reflect that, because if I just told all of the good things and all of the good stories and all of the wonderful memories and then sort of whitewashed it with this palette of, it was all rainbows and unicorns, first of all, nobody wants to read that book, right? Because it's not true. There has to be a truth that resonates with our experience.